Question number 12, the Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
Mr Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Corrections and asks, does she agree that information released under the Official Information Act by the Department of Corrections indicates that not one of the 423 prisoners serving life sentences would have been stopped by the proposed three strikes law?
The Honourable Judith Collins.
Mr Speaker, if when the member says, quote, the proposed three strikes law, end quote, he actually means the Sentencing and Parole Reform Bill, then the answer is yes.
The Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
Does she agree with her support party colleague David Garrett, who said in the first reading of the Sentencing and Parole Reform Bill that the victims of 77 murders in jail, quote, would be alive today if at the time they were killed this bill had been enforced? Arguable, it is simply arithmetic, unquote. A myth that he is continuing to mislead the public with even after receiving the same advice from her department that proves it is not true.
The Honourable Judith Collins.
Mr Speaker, the bill is currently in front of the Law and Order Select Committee, and I'm sure that that committee, of which the member is a deputy chair, will be able to take on account all those sorts of comments, and they may well bring about changes.
The Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
Point of order, Mr Speaker. I simply asked if she agreed with her support colleague. That answer went in no way to address the question. The question was, does the minister agree with her colleague, etc., etc.? She did not address that question.
It is difficult when members ask for opinions to get an exact answer, but I invite the minister to answer a little more closely to the question asked.
Well, Mr Speaker, the bill is in the Select Committee. When it comes out, who knows what's going to be in it? And I think that the member should have a somewhat more open mind towards the bill and what might actually come out than what he's clearly showing now.
Mr Speaker, I reiterate my point of order. Where in that question did she come anywhere close to answering the question, does she agree? She ignored your ruling completely.
I think where it's difficult for me to back the honourable member totally is questions where the ministers agree are always difficult questions. I mean, it's not as if a fact is being factual information is being sought, an opinion is being sought, and the minister has expressed an opinion that it's difficult for her as minister to comment on this until the legislation is back from the Select Committee. Now, it's difficult for me to say that that is not answering the question, because where opinions are sought, you'll get that kind of opinion in response, and I'm afraid I cannot assist the member further on that. Point of order, the Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
Are we having points of order in silence?
Yes, they will.
Thank you, sir. Look, without taking issue with your ruling, you made comments to the effect that it required, I think, a complex answer, and that the bill was before a Select Committee and therefore the minister could give an answer after that, or words to that effect. It is not complex, I would have thought, Mr Speaker, to answer, does a minister agree or not agree with some proposition? It's very simple. It's probably one of the most simple questions asked in this parliament. And to sort of mince around the edges by talking about a Select Committee process, or what my view may be, sir, or others' view, it's simply, does she agree with a statement that has been made in this House on a first reading by a coalition support party, Mr Garrett?
Speaking of the point of order,
Mr Speaker, I refer you to Speaker's rulings. I think it's page 1578, which basically states, sir, that a member cannot ask for a yes or no answer or expect such an answer, and that is exactly what Mr Cosgrove is expecting. If he is not, then he has had an answer because the minister expressed an opinion about the question.
Order. No, I do not need to hear further on this. The member is absolutely correct. That is the correct Speaker's ruling, and there are many Speaker's rulings that point that out, that in fact a member cannot, in that kind of question, ask for a yes or no answer. Where I'll back members absolutely in seeking information is where they put a primary question down that seeks information. I'll endeavour to make sure this House is provided with that information. But where an opinion is sought, especially where does someone agree with someone else? I mean, ultimately the minister doesn't even have any responsibility for what another honourable member may say. And she has expressed her opinion very clearly that she cannot agree one way or the other until she knows what the legislation will actually do. And I don't believe we can take that matter any further, and I invite the member to ask a further supplementary question. Point of order.
I just without challenge.
Order.
Without challenging your ruling, I just make it clear I did not in that question ask for a yes or no answer. I simply asked, as I put it to you, sir, does she agree? And I assume we're setting a new precedent in the House that ministers can go wide of the mark, whether it's in a primary or supplementary, and avoid simply answering the question, do they agree with the proposition or not? But that is your ruling, I respect it. Supplementary to the Minister. Supplementary to the Minister. Does the Minister have a responsibility to ensure the public is correctly informed about legislation being promoted by her government? And given that she had knowledge from her department that Mr Garrett's claims about the 3 strikes provisions within the legislation are incorrect, why did she choose to stand by, say nothing and allow the New Zealand public to continue to be misled, instead, as she should do as a minister, set the record straight?
The Honourable Judith Collins.
Mr Speaker, if the member had only done his homework, then he would know that I am actually not the Minister in charge of the Sentencing and Parole Reform Bill, but the Honourable Simon Powers, and perhaps if he'd like to put a question down for that member, I think he should do so.
The Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
Point of order, Mr Speaker.
Point of order, the Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
Point of order, Mr Speaker. The OIA request...
Order. Order. There's noise on both sides, and I do want to hear the member clearly.
Sir, I have a copy of the OIA request. The OIA request was to the Department of Corrections, and the information was released from the Department of Corrections. The Minister, as I understand it, does have, as Corrections Minister, ministerial responsibility for the Department of Corrections, and I asked her in respect of that OIA. She has a duty, I would have thought, to set the record straight and, I presume, stand by the information released by her own department. I was asking about the OIA, sir.
The issue is a difficult one because where a minister says they do not have responsibility for a specific issue, I have to accept that. I cannot adjudicate in that matter as Speaker. I cannot say that that minister has responsibility. Now, the member's primary question was indeed, it focused exactly on information from the Department of Corrections, but his final supplementary did become quite a complex question. I believe that it would be unreasonable to expect the Speaker to adjudicate. In fact, the Speaker cannot when a minister says, I am not responsible for that particular matter raised in that question. Point of order, the Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
I'd be grateful, and you may wish to take some time to consider this, and I accept that if you do. Are you telling this House that a minister does not have responsibility for information from her, in this case her department, which is released under the OIA, and therefore can avoid making comment on that information?
Order. I'm not saying that, or what I'm saying is the minister has said I'm not responsible for the particular matters covered in that question. And as Speaker, I cannot adjudicate on that. Speakers cannot adjudicate on that. And that is simple fact of the matter. I think we should now come to, unless there are further supplementaries, the Honourable Clayton Cosgrove supplementary
to the Minister. Does she now accept that because of the information released under the OIA from her department, that the legislation before the House, of which she is a minister in the government and presumably supports, is now a cruel hoax on the public, especially victims of crime, as it would not have saved a single life, according to her own department's advice, which I assume she stands by and which I assume she's responsible for?
The Honourable Judith Collins.
Mr Speaker, I keep saying to this member that he should wait until the bill comes back from the Select Committee. He's a member of the Select Committee. There will be submissions made by members of the public. The bill is now in the Select Committee. He is the Deputy Chair. He has the opportunity to actually hear the submissions. And so I really think that until the bill comes back, it's a bit hypothetical, frankly.
David Garrett.
To the Minister, can she confirm that the difference in effect between Act's 3 Strikes Bill as compared to the Sentencing and Parole Reform Bill is National's addition of a requirement that an offender must, in addition to having been convicted of a listed offence, been sentenced to imprisonment for at least 5 years?
The Honourable Judith Collins.
Mr Speaker, there is clearly a difference between the Act policy and the bill as it was first introduced, but after the Select Committee's finished with the bill, I'm not sure what it's going to come back with, because that's going to be a matter for the Select Committee.
We come now to questions to members, and point of order, the Honourable